At 3 a.m., my girlfriend screamed on the phone, "You're clingy? I need space," and hung up. So that same night, I packed everything and disappeared for 3 years. 3 years later, she found me in a coffee shop and said, "So, what if you ran? The baby is yours." I still remember the sound more than anything else. Not her words, not even the fight. Just the angry little buzz of her phone vibrating nonstop on the kitchen counter at 3 in the morning, while I lay in our dark bedroom staring at the ceiling and reaching over to a cold, empty side of the bed that was supposed to have my girlfriend in it, not a pile of creased sheets. For a second, I thought she was in the bathroom, maybe grabbing water, so I listened. But there was nothing. No door, no faucet, just that constant vibration downstairs and the digital clock next to me burning 3:07 a.m. into my brain. We'd been together 2 years, living together 8 months, and I'd been stupid enough to think we were in the planning a future phase, not the where the hell is she at 3 in the morning phase. So I picked up my phone, blinked the sleep out of my eyes, and did what any normal boyfriend would do when he wakes up alone in the middle of the night with no text, no call, nothing. I typed a simple message. "Hey, you okay? Where are you?" and hit send. 30 seconds later, my phone lit up with her name. And before I could even clear my throat, she was screaming in my ear, "Are you serious right now? You're checking up on me at 3 in the morning. Do you have any idea how suffocating you are?" And I'm sitting there, half awake, trying to process how a worried text turned into a crime, saying, "I woke up and you weren't here. I was worried, that's all." But she just keeps going. "No, you're controlling, Evan. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You always have to know where I am and who I'm with and what I'm doing. It's like you're breathing down my neck 24/7. I can't do this. You're too clingy. I need space." And before I can even respond, before I can say, "Where are you? Who are you with? Why is your phone blowing up downstairs?" the line goes dead, call ended, and the only sound left in the room is my own breathing and the quiet hum of the fridge through the wall. I sat there in the dark, with the phone still in my hand, staring at the ceiling, feeling something inside me go very cold and very still, like someone had flipped a switch from "fight for this" to "we're done here." It wasn't the first time she'd called me clingy, not even close. It had started as a joke a few months after she moved in, me asking, "Text me when you get home," and her laughing, "Okay, Captain Clingy." But then it kept showing up in arguments, a little sharper each time, like when I'd ask why she rolled in at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, and she'd say, "Stop being so needy." Or when I'd ask who Tyler with the smiley face was, and she'd snap, "You're obsessed with my phone, it's weird." So hearing, "You're too clingy, I need space" at 3 a.m., while she was God knows where, snapped everything into focus. I looked around the room and suddenly it didn't feel like our bedroom anymore. It felt like a storage unit full of my stuff with a stranger temporarily occupying it. The bed, the dresser, the TV, the beat-up lamp in the corner I'd had since college. All mine from my old apartment. The lease in the drawer in the kitchen with only my name on it because her credit was wrecked. The stack of bills showing I paid 70% of everything while she was between jobs for 6 months. The ring box hidden in the back of my sock drawer with the $4,200 engagement ring I'd bought last winter because she'd been sending me screenshots of dream rings and talking about wedding colors like it was a done deal. All of that collided with the fact that I was being treated like a prison guard for asking my missing girlfriend where she was. So something clicked. People talk about breaking points like explosions, yelling and throwing things, but mine was quiet. Just a slow, steady realization that I was done auditioning for the role of good enough boyfriend in a show she clearly didn't want to be in. I didn't call her back. I didn't text again. I just lay there waiting to see if she'd walk through the door or if this would turn into one of those stories where the guy wakes up and realizes he's been single for months without knowing it. At 6:23 a.m., the lock finally turned. I watched the red numbers on the clock flip while I kept my eyes mostly shut and listened to her tiptoe in, the faint smell of cigarettes and someone else's cologne trailing behind her, the soft clatter of her keys, the whisper of her clothes as she peeled them off and dropped them on the chair. She paused at the edge of the bed like she was checking if I was awake, then slipped under the covers and pressed her ice-cold legs against my back, exhaling like she'd finally made it home after a long, hard night at girls' night. Her phone started buzzing again on the nightstand, relentless, and she flipped it over face down so the screen wouldn't light up the room and ruin the illusion that everything was fine. I lay there listening to her breathing slow and deepen, smelling the smoke in her hair, staring at the wall and thought, this is it. This is the last night I ever do this. When her breathing turned into full-on sleep, I slid out of bed as quietly as I could, grabbed a t-shirt and jeans, and went to the living room, my heart weirdly calm, like my body knew this was the right move, even if my brain hadn't caught up. At 8 on the dot, I called my boss, told him I had a family situation, needed to take my vacation days starting today, and promised I'd still be reachable by email. He asked if I was okay. I said, yeah, just need to handle some stuff. And he said, take care of yourself, we got things covered. At 8:15, I texted my best friend Jason, the one guy I knew would show up no matter what. Need your truck and your muscles today. I'll buy gas and food. And he replied 3 dots. Then, Jesus burying a body? And I said, something like that. And he wrote back, be there in an hour. By the time he knocked at 10, she was still passed out in the bedroom, blackout curtains drawn, world oblivious. I opened the door. He stepped in, looked around, raised an eyebrow at the half-packed boxes I'd started, then at the closed bedroom door and said, so, we're doing this? And I said, yeah, we're doing this. And that was all he needed. We moved fast. Anything that was mine went into boxes and straight down to the truck. My TV, my couch, my cheap but sturdy kitchen table, the mismatched chairs, the pots and pans I'd had since my first apartment, my computer, my monitor, my consoles, my clothes, my shoes, the framed photos of my family, the books I actually read. Not the aesthetic ones she stacked on the coffee table for Instagram. I left everything that was hers. Her mountain of clothes spilling out of drawers. Her makeup spread across the vanity like a Sephora exploded. Her shoes lined up by the door. That expensive hair straightener she'd guilted me into buying because the cheap ones fry your hair. I even left the bed, the one I technically bought, because right then she was drooling on the pillow and I didn't want it anymore. That mattress felt contaminated with every lie I was only just now willing to admit to myself. While Jason hauled, I sat at the kitchen table canceling everything I could think of, called the power company, the internet provider, the gas company, told them I was moving and needed my name taken off the accounts. I opened Venmo, canceled the recurring transfers I'd set up so she could grab groceries and cover gas until my job starts, deleted the app. Then I drove to the phone store and told the guy behind the counter I needed a new number, new SIM, fresh start, and 15 minutes later, I walked out with a phone that nobody connected to her had access to. By mid-afternoon, we had my entire life in Jason's garage, stacked in labeled boxes, and the apartment looked like a furnished Airbnb, enough stuff to function, but hollow, like the soul had been removed. Jason kept looking at me, like he was waiting for me to crack, to throw something or break down. But instead, I was just steady. You sure about this? He asked while we leaned against his truck, sweat drying in the driveway. She's gonna wake up and lose her mind when she figures it out. I shrugged. She said she needed space. I'm giving it to her. He let out a low whistle. "You're cold, man." I shook my head. "I'm done." On the way back to his place, I stopped at the jewelry store downtown, the one with the two bright lights and the lady who'd helped me pick out a ring 6 months earlier. I slid the velvet box across the glass and said, "I need to return this." And when she gave me that soft, knowing look and asked, "Things didn't work out," I just said, "Not the way I thought." And she checked the paperwork, explained she could only give me about 70% of what I'd paid. And I said, "Fine," because getting rid of that ring felt like cutting off a chain. I walked out with $3,100 in cash and used it that same afternoon to put a deposit down on a one-bedroom apartment in another state and gas up my car. That night, I crashed on Jason's couch, my boxes stacked like a wall of evidence in his garage, my phone silent for the first time in years, and waited for regret or sadness or guilt to hit. But all I felt was this strange, clean emptiness, like a room after you've taken the trash out and opened the windows. The next morning, I got in my car, set my new phone to Do Not Disturb, plugged in the address for my new apartment 3 states away, and drove. 15 hours. 3 gas stations. 1 greasy diner where I ate rubbery eggs at a sticky counter and thought, this is what starting over tastes like. I never called, never texted, never checked to see if she'd tried to reach me from an unblocked number. If she walked into the living room that morning and melted down when she saw my stuff gone, I wasn't there to hear it. I started my new job 2 weeks later like nothing had happened. Told my new coworkers I'd moved for a change of pace and a better opportunity. Went to therapy because I didn't want to become the paranoid guy who flinches every time his new girlfriend stays out late, and slowly built a life where too clingy meant I actually care if you're alive, not whatever distorted version she'd been selling. 3 years went by. I got promoted. I bought a better couch. I dated casually and eventually, seriously, a woman named Maya, who actually texted when she was running late and never once accused me of controlling her for asking, "You good?" when she was out past midnight. I started to think of the old apartment as something that happened to a different person, like an embarrassing story from college you only tell when you're drunk. Then, last Tuesday, I was sitting in a coffee shop near my office, headphones in, laptop open, halfway through a bug ticket and a lukewarm cappuccino, when someone slid into the chair across from me like they had every right to be there and said, "So, this is where you've been hiding." And I looked up and almost forgot how to breathe because it was her. Lena, 3 years older, hair a little shorter, lines a little deeper around her eyes, but still wearing that same tiny smug smile, like none of this was her fault. And just like that, the old life I'd buried tried to claw its way back to the surface. She sat there like no time had passed, like she'd just stepped out to grab coffee 3 hours ago and not vanished out of my life 3 entire years without a single word of apology. And the first thing she said wasn't "sorry" or "I messed up," or even "why did you leave?" No, it was, "So, this is where you've been hiding." Like I'd gone into witness protection instead of doing the one thing she told me to do at 3 in the morning when she screamed, "I need space," and I just stared at her for a second, stomach twisted, mind blank, heart steady in a way it never was, not with her, and said the only thing that made sense, "How did you find me?" And she gave me this little proud smile full of chaos and ego and said, "Your friend finally told me." Like she'd won something. Like she tracked me down using detective skills and not manipulation. Like she hadn't burned every bridge on the way out of my life. And I said, "Which friend?" Already knowing the answer was a lie because Jason would never fold on me like that. And she just waved a hand, dismissive, "It doesn't matter. We need to talk." Like she was still entitled to my time, my energy, my explanations. And I closed my laptop without breaking eye contact and said, "No, we don't." because I meant it deeply, the kind of truth that settles in your bones after you've spent 3 years teaching yourself emotional CPR. But she grabbed my wrist hard enough to make the people at the next table look up and hissed, "Yes, we do. You don't get to disappear and pretend like none of this happened." And I just laughed, a sharp sound, not cruel but final. "I don't get to disappear?" I said, "You told me to leave you alone." And she shook her head like she was shaking off a nightmare, like her version of reality was the official one, and said, "I didn't mean forever. I was just stressed. You were suffocating me." And I just stared at her face, searching for the part that understood how insane that sounded, but it wasn't there. So I said, "At 3 in the morning when you weren't home, I asked where you were. That's not suffocating. That's basic concern." And she shot back instantly, "See? You still don't get it. Women need independence." Like the whole world was a TED Talk about freedom, instead of a situation where she'd stayed out till 6 a.m., refused to answer, called me controlling, then slept through a full-scale extraction of my life while vibrating notifications danced on her nightstand. I stood up to leave because I didn't owe her coffee shop closure. But then she said the line that froze me mid-step. "I have a son?" And the noise of the coffee shop just dropped away like someone hit mute. And I turned slowly, heartbeat loud in my ears, and said, "Congratulations." Because my brain was too shocked to be gentle, and she shook her head fast, hair falling over her shoulders. "No, you don't understand. He's yours." And I almost laughed, except there was a small part of me doing a frantic math against my will. Because yes, we'd been together 3 years ago. Yes, there was a window where she could have been pregnant when I packed my life into Jason's truck while she slept off the night. Yes, it was technically possible, though everything about her timing, her tone, her dramatic reveal felt like one of those traps you see online where someone tries to rewind life like a VHS tape just to avoid accountability. So I said 6 words that changed everything. "Show me proof or stop talking." Because if she was lying, she'd break right there. And if she wasn't, then at least we'd start with evidence instead of melodrama. And she pulled out her phone with shaking fingers and showed me a photo of a kid. A 2-year-old with messy brown hair sitting on a carpet surrounded by building blocks, cheeks flushed, eyes a shade I'd seen in the mirror maybe, or maybe not, because millions of kids look like that, and my gut said this is a stranger's child being used as emotional ammunition. But my brain whispered, "But maybe," and that maybe made me sick. So I said, "Birth certificate," and she said, "Father unknown," like that was supposed to move me, and I said, "DNA test." And she staggered back like I'd slapped her. "I knew you'd say that. You don't trust anyone." And I said, "I trust evidence." Which wasn't a joke. It was the only thing keeping my heart from exploding. And she said, "Fine. Saturday, 2 p.m., lab on Maple," and walked out like she'd won a negotiation. But my instincts were loud. Maple sounded cheap, and when I Googled it later that night, it was worse than cheap. It was the kind of place where the reviews are either 5 stars from shady accounts, or 1 star from people saying things like, "They spelled my name wrong on the results." And I sat there staring at the screen, thinking she really thought she could trap me with a lab that gives same-day paternity results like a drive-through. So I texted her, "Not that lab. Court-approved facility only." And she blew up, calling from a dozen numbers, "Stop controlling everything." And there it was again. The word that turned concern into crime in her mind. Controlling, like insisting on legal proof of fatherhood, was manipulation instead of literally the only reasonable decision when someone shows up after 3 years with a toddler and a story full of holes. I ignored the calls, waited for her to text a real lab, and finally, under pressure, she picked one from my list. No emojis, no dramatics, just an address. Saturday came. I showed up early. When she walked in, she wasn't alone. Her mother was there, eyes bright with judgment, and behind them was a guy, maybe her boyfriend, maybe the friend from those nights she never explained. I didn't care, except he was holding the child, who looked smaller in person, soft hair sticking up, sleepy, rubbing his eyes, and something in my chest twisted because children don't choose the chaos of their parents. We went through the process. Paperwork, swabs, signatures, chain of custody. The kid cried hard when they tried to swab him, little body shaking, and Lena snapped, "Stop being dramatic." Like a 2-year-old was a grown adult trying to win an Oscar, and the tech gently said, "He's scared. Let's try again." And it took everything in me not to say out loud, "If this child is mine, he deserves better communication skills than that." But I didn't, because I was already the villain in their narrative. I did my swab, signed the forms, left. In the parking lot, she followed me, heels clicking. "When this comes back positive, we need to talk about child support." And I said, "Lawyers will handle it." And she snapped, "Why are you so obsessed with lawyers?" And I said, "Because you filed a missing person report on me in your head, but not one legal claim in 3 years if this was real. That's why." And she yelled as I opened my car door, "You're going to regret this." And I said, "If the test is positive, I'll regret not being in his life. If it's negative, I'll regret this conversation." And closed the door. 3 days later, the results came. 0% probability. Not mine. Not even close. My stomach didn't drop. It rose. Like someone cut a string, and the relief wasn't joy. It was survival. Like dodging a bullet that was aimed at a life you'd finally built right. I forwarded the results to her with no message because nothing I could write would compete with the number 0. 2 minutes later, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize, and the moment I answered, she was screaming, "You bribed them. You sabotaged the test." And I said, "You had every chance to pick a lab. You picked the one I suggested from a court-approved list. There was no sabotage." And she screamed louder, "There's no way he isn't yours." And I said, "The only way that makes sense is if you really don't know who his father is." And she went quiet for 3 long seconds before hanging up. I felt angry then, not because she lied, not because she tried to trap me, but because that kid, whoever he belonged to, was going to grow up in that cloud of blame and confusion, and she'd use my name as a ghost story for why her life wasn't what she imagined. I blocked her again. Thought it was over. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, a process server showed up at my job. She was suing me for emotional distress and financial damages from abandonment, asking for $45,000 like I owed her compensation for leaving, after she told me she needed space at 3 in the morning, and reading the claim was like reading an alternate reality. She said I controlled her, isolated her, stalked her, and left her when she was emotionally vulnerable and pregnant, painting herself like some tragic heroine abandoned by a cruel man instead of a grown adult who screamed at her partner for asking where she was in the middle of the night. And I felt humiliated standing in my office holding papers while my coworkers pretended they didn't see. I hired a lawyer, a real one. We built a response, timeline, receipts, DNA results, screenshots, everything. Court day came. She wore a black dress like a widow. Her mother looked ready to testify about my sins. I sat calm, not because I wasn't shaking inside, but because 3 years of therapy had taught me that reactions are currency, and I wasn't giving her any more of mine. Her lawyer gave this dramatic speech about abandonment, trauma, and emotional abuse. And my lawyer stood up with a folder thick enough to build a small house and calmly dismantled every sentence. We weren't married. No shared assets. No shared accounts. She never filed a single legal document to locate me. She posted party photos 2 weeks after the breakup. She attempted fraudulent claims of paternity. The child is proven not to be mine. End of story. The judge looked exhausted and said, "Ma'am, relationships end. That's not a legal violation," and dismissed the case, ordering her to pay my legal fees, $2,500 she didn't have. Outside the courtroom, her mother hissed at me, "You ruined her life." And I said, "She tried to ruin mine," and added softer because it was true, "I hope the boy grows up better than this," and walked away before they could spin my words into more accusations. I changed my number again, started over again. Not like before, not a runaway escape in the dark, but a quiet closing of a chapter that had already ended the night I packed a truck while she slept. Months passed. The chaos faded. The lawsuit became a weird story my friends knew but didn't mention. My life didn't explode. It just kept going. Work, gym, dinners with Maya, Sunday mornings with coffee, and silence instead of arguments. Therapy sessions where I learned I wasn't controlling. I was communicating, and communication only feels like control to someone who fears being seen. Somewhere in that quiet, the last thread snapped. I don't check old photos. I don't replay the night she screamed about space. I don't fantasize about confrontations or perfect lines. And sometimes, when I wake up at 3 a.m., I don't even feel anger anymore. Just this honest relief that I listened when the universe whispered leave. Because here's the truth nobody tells you. Sometimes the cleanest revenge is distance. Not blocking someone out of spite, but walking away so completely that they can't reach you even if they're sitting across from you in a coffee shop saying, "We need to talk." 3 years after she told me I was too clingy for caring if she was alive, she found me and tried to pull me back into a version of reality where she was owed explanations from a man she once called suffocating for asking where she was at 3 a.m. And in that moment, I realized I didn't owe her closure or anger or softness or attention. She wanted space, and I gave her the one thing she never expected. Space so real, it became permanent. If there's a moral, it's this. When someone shows you their limits, believe them the first time. When someone screams, "Give me space," don't stand in the doorway begging to be let in. Just step back, step away, step out of the life they won't meet you in. Because sometimes the only explanation you ever need is silence, and the only goodbye that matters is leaving without looking back.